Good afternoon, 6-4 Owl Parents. Mr. Hagedorn here with our weekly update. We had a good first 2 days back, back to a full 5-day week next week. Students will have their first math NC check-in on Tuesday. They took an ELA check-in earlier in the year. We'll have that Tuesday, so that'll be during the morning. We'll run kind of an alternative schedule that afternoon. In math class next week, Math 6 Plus, we started our expressions and equations unit. We're going to continue talking about order of operation. Then we're going to start talking about the distributive property and simplifying expressions next week. In Math 6, we started our fractions unit, but we don't actually start with fractions. We start with greatest common factor and least common multiple. So we're going to finish that up next week. And then we're going to move on to fractions. We're going to talk about mixed numbers, improper fractions, and we'll finish the week up by talking about some adding of fractions. All right, have a great weekend. We'll see you on Monday.
All right, happy Friday, 6-4 Families Science Update. When we tracked out, we finished our unit on waves. And yesterday, we hit the ground running. We did not waste any time. We started our new unit of Layers of the Earth. It's a 4-part unit. The first is Layers of the Earth. Spent about 2 weeks on that. The kids are going to learn about what's underneath their feet all the way to the core of the Earth. We started today building a visual of that, which simply means it's a really fancy word for saying we drew a picture of the layers of the Earth. We're going to label that. They should need to know what each layer is made of. Some layers have special things like called convection currents. So we're going to be focusing on all about layers of the Earth. Now, the only thing different with science this quarter, moving forward to the end of the year, after I give assignments out, I'm giving a 2-week window for assignments. If those assignments are not completed in 2 weeks, I am not accepting them. So unlike last quarter where I would accept them all the way to the end of the quarter, every assignment given is given 2 weeks to complete. Will be accepted for full credit, but after 2 weeks, I will not be accepting those any longer. And if it's in Canvas, it'll just turn off. So paper or Canvas, 2-week limits on assignments. Next week's focus is Layers of the Earth. It's happy to be back. Have a good weekend. Hopefully it stays dry.
Oh, it is nice to have Mr. O back. Okay, so let's talk language arts real quickly. So yesterday, if students were here, they got 2 things. They got the new workbook for Module 3. It's called Sustaining the Oceans, and right inside it talks about author's point of view and ideal development in the story called World Without Fish, which is this book right here. So this is an informational text. You can see as I kind of flip through it that it's done in a kind of interesting graphic way. Sometimes the words are really big. Sometimes there's cool pictures and images and things going on. So it's got high interest level in the story content and in the way that it's presented, the text development. It's an interesting story, but it is informational text. So it's not a story. It's more of a kind of idea that's real. And so what we're going to be focusing on mostly, we started it yesterday, we're going to continue it today, and we're going to work on it into next week, is mostly reading for gist. So getting the basic who and what we're reading, and then text-dependent questions. We're going to do a lot of, here's a question, go find the answer in the text. Here's a second question, go find the answer in the text. Some students will be answering these text-dependent questions in their workbooks. So like last night, if you had a workbook, you might have seen your student working on these first questions that are in the workbook. And sometimes we're going to be giving students a kind of handout, and that has a little hint on it. So there might be a text-dependent question handout that has a little hint on it, or it might be in the workbook, depending on what happens.
Same questions.
They are exactly the same questions, Mr. O just said. Yes, 100%. Thank you very much, Mr. O. So that's language arts for the next few days. That's what we're going to be focusing in on. And then in social studies class, we're starting our unit on politics, which means government. And so what our main focus is at the beginning, yesterday, today, is basic foundations of government. What is a government? Why do we have government? What does government do for the people? What is it for? That's yesterday and today. When we get into next week, we're going to talk about the different types of governments throughout history. So we'll be looking at democracies, both representative and direct. We'll be looking at monarchies, kings, constitutional versus absolute monarchies. We're going to talk about anarchy. We're going to talk about communism. We're going to talk about authoritarian dictatorships. The different types of governments that you might see throughout history is our kind of goal. Next week, as we continue to kind of understand what the politics of the ancient world was all about. Okay? We'll be talking about citizens in the future. We'll be talking a little bit about special things like the Magna Carta and Justinian's Code, Hammurabi's Code. Those types of things are what our unit on politics are all about. So hopefully you had a good couple of days back. We have a good weekend coming up, and we'll see you next week.